such a nice, drowsy afternoon, and we are discussing rather major things. So I hope we are able to wake you up and listen. And these people have done really yeoman work in certain aspects of India, and rather big aspects of India. So I'll start with he prefers to call himself A.M. Gautam, Aditya M. Gautam, because there's an author with a rather similar name who doesn't subscribe to his sort of writing. So this is A.M. Gautam to you. So Aditya, tell us about your book, which is about millennials. So how did you reach that point of writing about millennials? What was the idea behind, putting out a certain research and a certain perspective about millennials of India?
So it was a coming together of a lot of stuff that I had been wondering about, like different aspects of culture, as in what do we eat, how do we decide what to watch, what to read, and how do we decide what conspiracy theories we want to subscribe to, which ones to reject, right? And I had been making notes on all of this stuff for a very long time, and then it began to become clear that my personal curiosities are also representative of my generation's curiosities and interests, and that was basically the point where the fuse went off and I started writing the book. So that is the gist of it, how I decided to write it, and how I decided what I want to write about.
So it was about consumption-based culture, I think, what you started about. I think if you just detail a bit about what your book is talking, I'll pass on to Karan and let him continue with that. About the book, how you came about the book, and what's your idea?
Right. So consumption culture, the neoliberal world order, and consumerism are themes that run through every aspect of my generation, which is the millennials, right? Because every single thing that we care about right now is in some way a commodity. So our body, let's say we talk about our body images, right? Then those are commodities that are catered to and marketed and then sold out to us. Similarly, if you say uh, religion is also now a commodity. You can choose the flavor of it. You can choose who to exactly who to donate to via your UPI app. You'll get a tax return on it, or you'll not have to pay as much tax as you would have otherwise. But the point being that every single of culture has been boiled down to something that is sellable, buyable, and consumable. Uh, so yeah, I guess I'll pass the mic to Karan now.
Well, I guess, well, first of all, thank you so much for the question, and thank you guys for coming. I think this is an interesting thread that connects themes in our books, the idea of consumption and commodity. Um, my book is about cannabis in India, and very different in certain ways, but of course, in the idea of a very common substance that people are kind of confused about. They're unsure of its legality. They're unsure of its um, of, of the safety of its consumption. So themes like that, and those are the themes that I explored in this book through my own experience quite a bit. Um, so of course, I also did write about um, how cannabis affects personal life in India, but I also zoomed out a lot from that. I wrote about the cultural impact of the substance. I wrote about the legal impact. I wrote about the pop culture impact of the substance. So I took a kind of a long. You can still hear me over this truck now. I took a long kind of like cohesive look at the story of cannabis in India, and the themes of consumption also appeared in it.
Thread continues to Jyotsana, and she should be talking about knowledge consumption. She has two books actually, and of course Karan also has two books with him. And but your books are different in a way. So which one do you want to talk about right now? I'll ask the legacy question later.
I'm going to talk about the new one, Pratap, or Defiant Newspaper, simply because it looks at knowledge consumption, in a very big way. uh, in the north especially, because this book is actually based in the north, pre-partition India to where it is now. And there is, I come across many, many people who look at me and say, we really don't care about your family's legacy, your family's history. We don't care about the fact that your grandfather was a freedom fighter. We don't care. Because not only are they consuming knowledge from different platforms, which is mostly, Instagram, Facebook, Reels, they're also consuming knowledge that is fed to them. And that kind of takes away from the authenticity of history as we know it. Somebody actually told me that, people are not reading. And my reply to that is, it's not funny, it's not amusing, they should be reading, and it's books like these that are trying to change that narrative. So we kind of, I mean, why now? I'm a fourth generation journalist. This book looks at my great grandfather who launched the newspaper in Lahore in 1919. So that is the year of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And I tried to convince my father to write it. The reason I wanted to get this story out is also because time is running out on that generation. Time has already run out, I think, on that generation. There are very, very few people who speak. There's also, from that generation, there is also, what I was speaking to a couple of other speakers today, there is it's an epidemic of silence. The stakeholders do not speak. They do not want to share because if they've gone through a conflict zone, they've gone through displacement, they say, we've done with it, why bring out that to the other generations, let them be. So time was running out for that. Secondly, this book also looks at, two chapters in the book, it looks at terrorism in Punjab, because again, we were directly impacted. And I've written this book with my father, who's a third generation editor, newspaper. He was the editor of the paper. And for the longest time, I couldn't convince him. And I had to tell him that there is one side of the story that is still missing in how this knowledge has been consumed. I don't know if, how many of you are really aware of what happened, but if you look at the years of Punjab terrorism, there are two narratives. One is the 1984 riots in Delhi, which were horrific, and they are actually even more horrific when you go into the details of it. The second is Operation Blue Star, when the army stormed the Golden Temple. But nobody actually looks at why the army had to storm the Golden Temple. What happened for 5 years before? And 5 years before, well, actually 2 years before, the army had to storm the Golden Temple. A parcel bomb was sent to my family newspaper. My father tried to open it because, as all the correspondence would come to him, he tried to open it and he was busy. He tried to open it, he couldn't open it, and he was really busy, so he called one of the employees and he said, just open it. So the boy was trying to open it next to him, he couldn't either. And my dad was really busy, and he said, could you just take it to the other room and open it? And he took it, and he died. 2 people died, one was seriously injured. And so my father didn't want to go into this. My argument with him for years was there is a side of story. This is the knowledge that has to come out. And he said, my mom wasn't keen for us to write it because she said we've been through horrific times and I don't want to get into it and I don't want to come into the limelight again. And my dad's argument was if I write it, I would write the whole story or nothing. So eventually, I persuaded him as a journalist to a journalist that these stories have to come out. And I'm hoping that we stay against the tide to continue to bring out stories like this because the system, the whole ecosystem keeps evolving. And we are against, I say I'm against, my book is going to sell against somebody who's an influencer or a content creator. She's got millions of followers and she's probably going to sell millions of copies in a day. But this is how it is, I'm hoping that there's still space for writers like us. And I've taken a lot of time.
So Aditya, I think you should take the next question. I'll talk about the journeys of the book. Like your journey to get to the writing and your journey after that, the reception and all that. So if you would, your book is a topic about, based on a topic that is of interest generally. So I would love it if you focus on the millennials of Kerala, if you have such a perspective. Otherwise, in general.
So just before our session, we are talking about how Kerala is God's own country and yet a very godless place, according to our esteemed moderator. Uh, and I think that is something that has shaped a lot of perception towards the millennials in Kerala, uh, on whom I don't specifically focus in the book, but I think that the archetype is pretty much, I have found, to be honest, where they are more liberal than, say, their counterparts in the Gangetic plains. They are more open to a multicultural, more globalist identity, so as to say. But yeah, coming back to the book's journey, I think I already talked about how I came to write it, but then I traveled extensively all over the country. I specifically oscillated between where I currently live, which is Bangalore, which is a very metropolitan, very sort of globalized city, right? IT center of the beating IT heart of our country, and the place that I call home, which is Haridwar and UP, and what is sometimes called the cow belt, like part of the cow belt. And because I was writing about this generation that is spread out all over the place, it was very interesting to capture that spirit, that we are the same people who are forwarding in misinformation via WhatsApp channels, via all sorts of mediums. But at the same time, we are also the same cynical people who will never believe, like really believe what's on the screen. So the target of our misinformation are actually not we ourselves. It's older people or younger people. Uh, in a similar manner, there was a juxtaposition of how different similarly aged people belonging to the same generation, are are across different areas, right? So millennial in Mathura, there is an incident I talk about in my book, that I asked him, do you know who are the millennials? And he says that superhero team, right? Because he's thinking about the Avengers. So he doesn't know what generation he belongs to, and he doesn't care. But he still knows a movie that was made in the US and released first in India before its American release, because he is a target audience, right? Because Indian millennials are the target audience of anything that's made for young people now. And I think, like, how this helped me gain a wider perspective was that it informed me of how many convictions of mine are open to interpretation, or even I am open to question them and make them more flexible. uh, I think I am a more open person now than I was when I began working on this book. I am more open to hearing people on different spectrums of ideology, religion, philosophy, anything, right? Uh, I talk about apoliticism in the book and how I used to consider it almost as if it were a sin, right? As if, I, like, I used to think that apolitical people are basically content pigs who don't care about the world beyond what they can see. And while writing the book, while actually talking to people who identify as apolitical, I was able to appreciate their worldview, that sure, that's valid enough, is what I ended up on, which was like diametrically opposite to my starting position. So that has been the journey of the book, to challenge my personal notions about the world. uh, and yeah, as far as reception is considered, I think it has generally been satisfactory. An interesting thing that has emerged is that people always think this is a very serious book that they are going into, and then they are pleasantly surprised to find that it has the potential to make them laugh at places. It has the potential to make them remember their past love affairs across caste lines, or like places where they violated the love laws, as Arundhati Roy calls them. And I'm really glad that the book has been able to give that to people, to sort of validate the fact that they also belong to this generation called the millennials, and that is not dependent on their station in the socio-economic pyramid, right? So yeah.
Karan, I think your first book, it's a fiction. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, What was the transition? I mean, writing fiction and getting to cannabis.
I always thought of myself as someone who would continue writing fiction. I think fiction can tell the truth in a way that non-fiction really cannot, even though non-fiction is technically supposed to be true. And what I love about fiction is that you choose a lie to tell a larger truth. And I love to tell lies. It's so much fun, so much just to make stuff up and then let people decide what part is true and not. So for this was obviously a completely different thing. This is about kind of a sensitive, legally sensitive issue in India. I had to be really, really fact-based and factually correct in this. But I don't have an academic background at all. So my approach to writing this book was, again, a very personal approach and a very storytelling approach. I put myself in a lot of these situations. So I ended up being traveling in about 8 or 9 different Indian states to research the story of cannabis in India. And I say the story of because it is written in the way a story might be written. So there are stories of farmers in Himachal Pradesh. There are stories of smugglers in the Andhra Odisha region. There's of course the story of the now extinct. I almost call it. I call myself a marijuana paleontologist when I was looking for the Idiki gold in Kerala. In the Northeast, I met a lot of people who then, who from cannabis went on to using more severe drugs, and it was their personal human stories that helped color my story, color my book. So I think in that sense, even though this is non-fiction, it was very heavily shaded by my affinity for fiction.
Jyotsana, your first book was a little different. Yes, very different. Talk about that.
So unlike Karan, I've stuck to hardcore truth because I'm a journalist and, the imagination, no, it's not. I agree with you. I agree with you. So the first book was vastly different, and yet I think at the core of both the books, it's the same thing about accepting and acceptance. So the first book is called Stone Shame Depressed. It was an investigation into the life of Indian teens. Well, actually, teens is a definition that is really fluid now. It kind of begins at 8 or 9. And it looks at, their challenges in a social media environment around addiction, around body shaming, around and gaming addiction. Many things that, we don't look at or we dismiss very easily because these are children and it doesn't happen to them and just go out and play and everything will be sorted, but it is not getting sorted. The reaction to that book was predictably a lot of denial because we don't like to acknowledge that things are not okay at home, that our child has a problem with bulimia, or our child is anorexic, or our child is saying that I need medication for mental health. So I had a lot of people who said that this is a very Western book you've written. The book can apply to anywhere in the world, but I think we kind of tend to forget that now with this whole digital world, everything, our children are consuming the same thing at the same time. There is no difference anymore. So, and I think at the core of this book as well, it's going to be acceptance. There is, it looks at issues of, it looks at stuff like, say, what is patriotism today? What is democracy today? Why has the meaning changed so drastically of a word called nationalism? Why are martyrs no longer sacred people? And why is ideology dictating everything to us? So I have to see the acceptance to this book, which is releasing on Monday.
Oh, it's going to be released.
It's going to be released, but it is in the bookstore here. It's
Okay.
made it.
So we started talking, touching upon the larger topics about India. And I think one topic all three of you have in common is addiction and a certain generation and certain substances which cause addiction. Um, I think maybe you could bring out a few more sentences about, specifically what you found traumatic and what you think is the way forward.
So I think each generation has a defining institution, right, that has an oversized impact on it. And I think for millennials, it was the internet and then later on the social media, which is now basically synonymous with the internet, and mostly what anyone does on the internet right now except porn, right? Uh, but yeah, addiction. If I have to talk about addiction, then I think that's the most visible part of it. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people around who are still scrolling Instagram or at least feeling the urge to do it. And I think it's very interesting because it has changed our ideas about everything. One of the most interesting is identity. So back when back in the ancient times before social media, right, there was not this thing about individuals thinking of themselves as brands. That's very new, but it's so ubiquitous and so powerful that it almost seems a fact of nature now. And what that has done basically is that because every individual thinks of themselves as a brand that will be consumed by a hypothetical mass, sort of. So that so it has changed how we interact with the world. Because we want to be listened to by everyone, we talk to everyone. We talk in the same way that a business would talk to its consumers. We we curate our images to be palpable to everyone. We try to fit in by conforming as much as possible to whatever is fashionable at the time. It could be something extreme on the extreme side of right wing populism. So it could be someone demonizing meat eating, right? Or it could be something on the opposite end of the spectrum, and it could be someone becoming vegan. But what both those people are trying to do is they are trying to fit into neat slots of identity and become products that are ready to be consumed by a hypothetical mass of people. Even if they have 10 followers on Instagram, the mindset is that they are a brand. And I think that's an extremely addictive way of thinking itself, because it puts a filter, pun intended. It puts an Instagram filter on the word itself, on how you see anything, be it language or your body or uh, your communication or the clothes you wear, the bike you ride, the car you have, right? Everything becomes something that needs to be put into this neat slot. And I think we are almost on the verge of seeing a new iteration in this respect as AI models become more and more powerful. I think for the next generation, it is going to be a sort of constantly interactive social media, which I don't know how it will impact the world, but I am pretty sure that the impact will be very large, and it will resound for a very long time. So yeah, that's my take on addiction.
Karan, do you think, as Aditya said, um, the social media and the modern technology taking over is, do you think, what's your take on cannabis, or this being the greater and the worse addiction?
That's a very difficult question to answer because I think everyone's addictions are different. Cannabis actually, I mean, there's a lot of debate about whether we can even call it an addiction. A lot of people will call it a dependence because it's not chemically addictive the same way that, say, alcohol might be or harder drugs might be. But philosophically, I did do a lot of research about what it means to be dependent, or what it means to be, whatever word you might put on it, what it means to want something all the time. What it means to want something that you can't go to sleep without. There's some people who can't go to sleep without scrolling through Instagram for hours. There's some friends I know who can't go to sleep without smoking some marijuana at night. So in many ways, just to piggyback on what Aditya also said, there are these addictions that I think every generation has had them, but I feel that the millennials, and I feel even more the generation that's following us, I think we're all millennials. I think me and Aditya are, for sure. You are, for the sake of this conversation. Honorary millennial. Um, I feel that there is that pressure. So I did write about. I did compare the dependency of cannabis to other dependencies, whether it's somebody who loves to go shopping, otherwise they're not going to get the joy they want in their life. Whether it's harder drugs, whether it's, I mean, I interviewed a bunch of people who were brown sugar abusers, which is a form of heroin. So there is a vast gamut of addictions, and I, I just feel it depends on how much control one has over oneself before indulging in either or.
Jyotsana, would you take that question forward?
Yeah, I'm telling you from my previous book. It was fascinating for me because when I was writing the book, I said, I'm going to write about the last chapter because I don't really know too much about it and I have to research a lot. So I left gaming as the last chapter. And it was actually the most interesting one because the levels of gaming addiction are, no one speaks about it. And I think it's kind of an addiction that it kind of just everyone misses it. And yet, WHO has called it an addiction. If you speak to a lot of mothers, they will tell you that, a friend's son, he started having nightmares, and it turned out that, he was playing Fortnite or Roblox at Fortnite since he was 8 years old. And by the time he was 10, he couldn't sleep, he was having nightmares. And so, like he said, addiction comes in different ways. You would also asked, if there's a solution. I think the solution in this is, it all stems, in my opinion, from the phone. And I've always said this from day one, that you do not need to handle a child a phone at the age of 6, 8, 9. You do not need to handle social media to a child who is 8, 9. If there's an age that is given at 13, why are you in such a hurry? Now the new trend is to let young girls have makeup. Sephora babies, they're called. Yeah? 8 years old, they become the new content creators. They are giving us gyan on collagen, and they're putting retinol on their faces. To me, what are we thinking? I mean, we are leading the way. If we are not showing them the way, they're going to do what is easily available. And the mothers are, they're proudly putting their 8-year-old, 9-year-old in a Sephora store, full on makeup, and this is how kids are going to school. My 12-year-old came and said, Mama, my locker is the only one that's empty. Everybody else's locker is just full of makeup. This is 12-year-olds. Addiction.
No, you were, all of you, when you were talking about addiction and ages, I was thinking about another addiction, because when technology came, in the form of social media, initially I remember the elder members of my family coming and asking me, "Oh, can you do this on my phone? I can't, I don't know, I don't have the technology." Now I'm bombarded by WhatsApp forwards from the same generation. And they are of a capability that can change social perspectives. So it's like when you don't know the etiquette, or you cannot be taught the etiquette of anything, this has become embarrassing at the worst. I mean, I don't think anybody has talked about that yet. You're just being very tolerant. When we are very intolerant about children accessing technology, we are very tolerant about super senior citizens who have no idea about what is going on, but they are reacting with it. They have a bomb.
And also because, they're forwarding the WhatsApp without confirming, looking at the sources. There's health advice that is coming from like family groups. But do you even know? I mean, there's just one random person who says anything and everybody is just forwarding it. So there is no basis to this information.
No, it's that they are members, alumnus of our WhatsApp university. And it's like, whatever you tell them, it's like, no, it was on WhatsApp. It's like it was in the thesaurus, or like Run and Martin, whatever. So would you like to read a paragraph each, please? Or, I mean, you have something to say out?
Yeah, so this is what I meant when I said that even when millennials are creating misinformation, they are not necessarily the primary consumers of it, because like she says that uh, like people older than us, who are generally called boomers, they they placed a certain amount of belief in authority that was far stronger than what we do. So for them, a news outlet telling a thing has to be the truth, because that is the role of the news media in their word, right? Or again, like technology is supposed to be made by clever people, and older people assume that these clever people have placed checks and balance, like they have placed checks and balances, which will take care of the trustworthiness of what they are seeing on their screens, right? So in a way, it has been a case of like wool been pulled over their eyes, and so this is one part of it. But I would also like to address what Jyotsana just said about teenage girls and things like that, like kids getting access to phones and social media at a very young age. So again, I would say that this is part of a much larger problem, which is the problem of the neoliberal world order or the capitalistic world order exerting itself on our lives to such a large extent that we have to provide our kids distractions so that we can work in peace, right? The parents who are providing their like phones or Instagram to their young kids are not doing it because they think that's extremely good for the kids. They are doing it because they probably both of them have to be earning in order to survive, and they have to go to offices and they have to come back late at night. Meanwhile, the kid also doesn't have to get bored, and so they get handed down a phone. Similarly, a teenage girl is putting on makeup not necessarily because her parents are not paying enough attention to what she does, but because there is now a genuine fear that people are not going to be employable after a certain point, right? And one thing that seems employable and gainfully employable is becoming an influencer. So the teenage girl knows that if she knows how to put on makeup in the perfect way right from the age of 13 or 12 or 14, her chances of becoming a successful influencer are much more than they would be otherwise. So I mean, it's good. It feels good to be a Luddite and a naysayer and a doomsayer and say that technology is bad, mobiles are bad, social media is bad. But I think that's a very comfortable and a sort of privileged position to be in, uh, because these are necessary things. I was at an event where Pico Ayer said that he doesn't use his phone at all and he doesn't scroll Instagram feeds. And the entire time I was wondering about this dosa seller near my place where I live, who while making dosas, he's constantly scrolling Instagram on his phone. And I was thinking that this is probably the difference between the lives of a dosa maker and the life of Pico Ayer, right? uh, Addictions are lashed on to by people who need addictions, not people who choose addictions. Is the note that I would
No,
like
I
to
just
end
want
this
to,
on.
I just want to interject because I agree absolutely. Social media is inescapable, as is the digital world. But all I say is that checks and balances. A 9-year-old doesn't need to be. Of course, I mean, an 18-year-old by all means, because by the time, if you have controlled a child at 8, 9, 10, by the time a child reaches 15, that child would be in a better position to handle the dangers on social media, because pedophilia, grooming, all of this, which I have chronicled in my book, it's very real. So a child at 11, 12 may not be able to cope with strangers coming through the games, strangers coming through on social media.
I think,
I have
Karan,
nothing to say about children, just don't let them do drugs.
could you read something? I'd love to hear that Idiki Gold bit.
I'll read a short excerpt from my book, and I've chosen a bit that brought me to Kerala, of course, since we are here. I was in Idiki, I went to Munnar. Idiki, for many of you who may or may not know, I mean, famously, one of the most famous strains of ganja that grew in India, of cannabis that grew in India, was here in God's own country, God's green earth. It was in Idiki, but it doesn't exist anymore, or it mostly doesn't exist anymore. Most of the cannabis that comes into Kerala now comes from elsewhere in the country. But I went to Munnar nevertheless to sort of find out. Um, Nowadays, the most popular expert from Idiki is not the cannabis leaf, but tea leaves. After one night in Kochi, I find myself on an early morning bus to Munnar, up towards this idyllic land of tea plantations. Of course, I try the tea, binge drinking all day, as if each cup was a little shot of soma. It tastes crisp, with a slight creaminess to it, sweetish even without adding sugar. I imagine that the local strain of extinct weed probably shared the same flavorful qualities. Crisp and fruity, a delightful head trip. There are many local legends for the inception of the Idiki Gold, a strain that landed in the shores of Idiki in the 1980s. Also nicknamed Neela Chadayan, the weed was possibly a hybrid of two different strains. Journalist Bobbins Abraham in interviewing some of the expert growers from this region, estimated that the strain was likely 80% of Indian origin and about 20% foreign. Abraham wrote his report in 2017, years after much of the cultivation of the plant had halted. That year had also been marked by a rainfall deficit, which hurt the production of the main cash crop in the region, cardamom, and led some farmers to test the waters with cannabis once again. However, Abraham told me more recently that the cannabis cultivation in Idiki is next to nil. So, arriving in Munnar so long after the last of that beloved blue curly, I almost feel like I'm a marijuana paleontologist. 2 decades ago, thousands of acres of land in the outskirts of Munnar had been dedicated to the cultivation of cannabis, in dense jungles which sometimes ran into the unmarked borders of neighboring Tamil Nadu, and regions near Mathiketan, Todupuju, Katapanna, and more. Forgive my pronunciation. Many of those areas now belong to local tribes or are protected by the forest department, including the reserve at the Papudum Shola National Park. Several tribal villages here are now close to outsiders. One of the remote villages became the first tribal panchayat in Kerala. The forest that formerly played host to cannabis cultivation cannot be visited without permission from tribal seniors, the forest department, the state police, and after crossing many more bureaucratic hurdles.
Jyotsana, would you read that part about your grandfather and Bhagat Singh, please, if you don't mind?
So my grandfather was a freedom fighter who was in jail with Bhagat Singh. So I'm going now, I'm from Kerala, I'm taking you all to Lahore Central Jail, which is on the day that Bhagat Singh was hanged. So my grandfather was also in the same jail and he knew Bhagat Singh very well. So I'm just going to, quote him. So we thought that the hanging would be on the morning of 24th March. But on the 23rd of March at about 2 p.m., the prison barber came running to us with tears in his eyes. And in a quivering voice, he said, "Sab kuch khatam ho gaya, everything is over." The Sardar is saying that they would probably be hanged today itself. He has conveyed Vande Matram to the two of you. Bringing their emotions under control, my grandfather requested Barkat to go back to Bhagat Singh and ask him for a keepsake that the two young men, he was in jail with another freedom fighter, would treasure as a remembrance. Half an hour later, the barber returned. In his hands were a black fountain pen and a comb. On the comb, Bhagat Singh had carved his name with a blunt instrument. Ehsan Ali, the other freedom fighter, kept the pen and I the comb. Every evening at 7 p.m., the chief warder would lock us up after securing all other prisoners. That day, he came at 4 p.m. When we asked him why he had come 3 hours early, he became emotional and could not speak. After several minutes, he composed himself and said the end had come, the three would be hanged. The three who were to be hanged were kept in ward number 14. There was a furlong between that ward and where we were kept. So we couldn't immediately gather what was happening with them. Just before 7 p.m., Bhagat Singh, Shivaram Rajguru and Sukhdev Thapar were brought out and taken towards the Phansi Ghar. As they walked, they loudly shouted, "Inqilab Zindabad." Hearing it, the other accused in the conspiracy case responded. Soon the entire jail was reverberating with loud cries of "Inqilab Zindabad." We too joined them. It spread even to the non-political prisoners who started shouting the same slogan and echoed across the jail. Then there was deadly silence. That night, no one ate in the central jail of Lahore and no one slept.
So I think I ended my last response on too positive a note, so I'll go back to doom saying. Uh, so yeah, let me know if it gets too much. Uh, Despite the glamorous and peppy sentiments often associated with the world's largest generation, multiple studies show that millennials are objectively worse off than previous generations on multiple counts, and many in India admit to being anxious about the future. We are so exhausted that we have no time to meet people, and as a result, we are lonely. We are so lonely that it exhausts us. We marry late or not at all. We cannot afford houses or cars or children. We are anxious about climate change. We have already gone through one recession and may be in the middle of another one. Facts are no longer sacrosanct. The news cannot be trusted. Previously unknown viruses can bring the world to a standstill. hold us hostage within our homes for the better part of 2 years, and the geopolitical horrors of the last century seem intent on staging a comeback. Going by the Norris, going by the Norris and Engelhardt school of thought, we should be ripe for religion's appeal right about now. We need something, a metaphysical glue to keep us from falling apart in a world that demands everything from us and yields next to nothing in return. Yet, religion doesn't quite fit the bill for those of us privileged enough to be entrenched in consumerism. In India, that implies an upper middle class, educated, metropolitan existence, constantly on the lookout for upgrades and improvements. You guys, basically, and me. Religion requires service from us, but we want a service for ourselves. We want it to come to us via the comforts of our screens, preferably, rather than making us go to it, at least not at a designated place of worship. We don't want to belong to a community, we want something that can help us craft a unique identity. Q, enter spirituality. Despite his penchant for staying free of definitions, over the years, various people have made attempts to define spirituality. And my favorite one by far is by Matthew Headstrom, professor of US religious history at the University of Virginia. Spirituality, the good professor says, is what consumer capitalism does to religion. This doing, I believe, is the transformation of an institution into a product.
I think that's all from us today. Thank you for a wonderful session. And this was quite different from the topics I've been dealing with the last few days. So it was eye-openers, and I'm definitely reading your book again. Thank you so much. I think that if there are any questions, we can
We can take a couple of questions.
This is addressed to Karan, the paleo
Yes.
anthropologist of cannabis.
Yes.
I would like to ask you on the gem lines of Idiki gold, which is 80% natural or indigenous, and the 20% is exotic.
So claimed. Yes.
So claimed.
Yes.
As a potential cannabis user, transferred it to chat, Meta AI. I'm consuming Meta AI. I'm replacing cannabis.
Okay.
So my question is regarding how Beatles came there. It is because of the North India was a hub of cannabis, and even Steve Jobs came to India because of the cannabis.
Okay.
What I learned is that even Silicon Valley, they foster usage of cannabis because it is considered to be a trigger of creativity. What is your take on cannabis as a trigger of creativity?
So, great question. I was asked almost the exact same question at the KLF just a couple of weeks ago about the relationship between cannabis and creativity. I personally don't think there's a direct relationship because a lot of people will tell you that their cannabis experience has led them to laziness and lack of creating anything new. So I really feel what it does, the way I explained it is, I use the example of Arjun from the Mahabharata, where he, what cannabis does, it helps you hyper focus on whatever you're already inspired to do. So I think if somebody already has a creative gene within them, or is already creating something, already halfway through composing a song or writing a book, I think it could help. But in the case of a lot of people, I think they use it just as an excuse, and it doesn't do them any good.
Let me first acknowledge that it has been a very wonderfully engaging session all throughout. Gautam, I was struck by one particular word that you said, a hypothetical mass. When you refer to the social media, you were referring to the audience of the content creators as hypothetical mass. What I understand from social media is that there are two kinds of people. One who are engaging in it for their own leisure, and the other who are in there for business. So the people who are doing it for business, they are the content creators who are collabing with companies and promoting their product. This is an actual market media. Social media has now become a market media. Then why would you still coin them as a hypothetical mass?
I was referring to the not the hypothetical exactly, but the virtual filter through which we see the word, which is sort of like an Instagram filter that people put on their photographs, right? And the distinction you make between people using social media for business and for individual use is actually what used to exist, say, 5 years ago. But that boundary has been deliberately blurred, because today, if you see any company's social media page, it has the exact same metrics that you as an individual would have. There are likes, shares, comments, the same metrics of engagement, right? Your reels have views, a business reels also has views. Your reels do better if you put money into them. The businesses reels do better if they put money into it. And that has been deliberately done so that each individual should think of themselves as a business, right? And the product is themselves or their identity, which is why you see so many individuals now boosting their reels. They are not getting anything out of it, but they are doing it just for that dopamine kick they get when the red like button blinks up, right? And that entire UI UX has been designed in a way to provide that dopamine kick, which is very similar to a slot machine in a gambling house. So that boundary has been blurred by our lords and kings now who sit in the Silicon Valley and decide how the world works.
One last question
Yeah,
from
thank
the
you.
gentleman
Thanks
behind.
for the session, and any one of you can take it. For some of us who are now touching 50, how do we coexist with millennials? Keen to get your views. Just some view examples or
We
suggestions.
don't.
Sure. Can I take this because I think that millennials are a very domesticated and generally peaceful generation because they have been so bombarded by the world's realities that to coexist with them is the easiest thing ever. It would be a real problem for millennials to coexist with Gen Z when Gen Z comes of age, because these are people who have been raised in the badlands, right? Millennials were people who got a, like, millennials inherited a cushy word. We actually believed that people had human rights, that the liberal world order was real, that there were checks and balances to governments and institutions and things like that, right? So we lived in our delusions and we developed according to our delusions. Our defense mechanisms are also like that. We are very less rabid compared to the people, say, who grew up maybe during the Second World War or the First World War or even during the partition, right? These people actually had to see the world as it is. Even my mother, when a religious riot happens, she is very calm about it than I am. She says that BJP always comes to power riding on blood and goes to power slipping down on blood. That is her understanding of it, and it is a very matter of fact understanding. I personally would be disturbed by seeing a riot in, say, Delhi or anywhere else, right? So yeah, I think as far as existing with millennials go, it's as good as having a cat in the house. You can just leave them to themselves and they'll
I want
come
to
on your lap and purr nicely.
No, I want to add to
Depends
that
on the cat.
because, I've worked with millennials and I have worked in for years with NDTV where we had no morning, evening, night. And I think when I worked with millennials, they would not turn up for a shift and they would not even tell you. So you had to call them. And you were like, your shift is here. And if that happened to any of us, we would lose our jobs, right? But on the flip side, I always say that Gen Z would probably take those bosses that we had to court today. They would just sue them because that work-life balance culture that we do not have at all, they've missed it because they've gone to the other extreme. And I think Gen Z is trying to reclaim it, but I think they're going to another extreme. So I think there's a lot of hodgepodge in the middle, but it's tough. I mean, if you're used to, I've crossed 50, so if you're used to that generation, handling them
Yeah.
is not easy.
I think we are run out of time now.